Hey, Judy.
How are you?
Good. Michael Carlin. You got time for an interview? So do I have your permission to record this?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. I want you to talk about, losing him 10 years ago, what that's meant, and what he meant to you while he was here. So tell us about that.
Well, when I met him, he drove me crazy, calling me, begging me to go out with him. And I finally did. It seemed like we knew each other forever.
What kind of a man was he?
He was difficult, but I loved him. I fell in love with him. I think about the same time he fell in love with me, because we both told each other the same day.
Wow.
We were together, and then we'd fight, and my Italian temper would flare, and his anger would flare, and we could never break that magnetic force that would always bring us back together somehow, some way, no matter what. And I think the first year was tough getting to know each other. The second year came easier. Then the third and fourth and fifth year were different than anything I experienced. But I learned a lot. I grew a lot. And I think the last year we were together was the best year of my entire life. Even though he had an accident in January and had fallen and had a head injury, I was with him 24/7 until that was taken away from me by his father. But when he came home from the hospital or the rehab, he would not let me leave his side. 24/7. He told me things that I never thought I'd ever hear come out of his mouth. And he got mad at me because I said, "Who are you and what have you done with my Michael?" Because he just never talked that way. He wasn't overly romantic, but he wasn't not romantic. He was like, if he was in the mood, he was in the mood. He'd be romantic. But for the most part, he wasn't. But for my birthday, he always made it right. Christmas, he always made it right. Holidays to him were nothing. He didn't care about anything. He didn't want a gift. He didn't want to celebrate. But he always made it special for me.
And talk to us, since this is a Tupac channel, about his relationship with Tupac and about how that was a looming thing in his life.
Well, he talked about Tupac in the years that he was there at Death Row, and it was no big secret. Everybody knows that he never really liked Pac, and he didn't like Pac simply because he thought that he was just a cocky smartass. And Michael didn't have time for that kind of stuff. And he thought he did stupid things, and he knew better. And he left Michael to pick up the pieces. And he tells you right on this one video, if he hadn't been there at the MTV Music Awards, Suge was going to put his hands on him. And to Michael, that means he's going to choke the shit out of him. He would have probably demolished him, as tiny as Pac was compared to Suge. But Michael stepped in between them and told them both, back off. You're in public, you're at an award show, people are watching, millions and millions of people are seeing everything that's going on. But Michael was there with Pac to do a job. He wasn't there to be his friend. He wasn't there to entertain him or to have fun. Michael was there to do his job. And that's what he did. And I don't care what anybody says. I don't I don't watch any videos. I don't listen to anybody else's opinion or what they think of me. But it's a high time that they just stop with this. She murdered him. If you knew Michael, you knew that he did not put up with bullshit. He did what he wanted to, when he wanted to, with who he wanted to, because he wanted to. And there was no stopping him. He got it in his head and he was on a mission, and that was all there was to it.
And did he ever talk to you about what happened the night Tupac was shot?
Oh, yeah. Talked about it a lot. In fact, him and my daughter had a lot in common, more than him and I, because I wasn't really a Pac fan. I became a Pac fan because of him, because of certain songs that he made me listen to the words to. Or he couldn't make me do anything. I couldn't make him do anything. But that wasn't our relationship. That's not who we were. That's not who we are. That's not who I am. But he talked a lot about it with Jasmine and enlightened me a lot. Pac was that one hell of a poet, but he wasn't a thug. And that was one of the things that Michael didn't like. You know, he was the type of person, say what you mean what you say, and follow through. Don't talk shit about things you don't know shit about. And he felt like the thug life was not Pac, and it didn't fit him, didn't suit him. And he was being something he wasn't. And with Michael, you can never be fake. And I'm the same way. So that was one of the things that we had in common more than anything. We didn't put up with that. We didn't tolerate that. We didn't have to, because both of us were so direct and forward and honest about everything. It didn't matter what it was.
And what did he tell you about the hours leading up to the shooting?
He said that he was in his room, and Frank had been on vacation, and Pac was super pissed because he hadn't heard from Frank for 2 weeks. And then when Frank arrived, he went and talked to him. Frank didn't know why until Michael told him later, but he went to his room and tried to take a nap after the meeting with George Calisis and Reggie and telling them to not carry guns. And apparently, from what I understand, they told everybody that Suge was trying to buy 6.62, which I came to find out was not true, but there's been so many things that haven't been along the way. And because of that, he was trying to get a liquor license. Therefore, he couldn't have anybody there with a weapon. But if you think about what was said, remember, they all had to attend a class in Vegas because they were bodyguards and carrying weapons. Now, why did they attend a class if they were not going to be carrying weapons? That just doesn't make sense to me. And Michael didn't have to go to the class because he had already went to the class previously. When they were all told that, Michael goes, fuck you. I am not guarding the biggest rapper in the world without a weapon. That's like taking a stick to a knife fight. Just like the night he was in the middle of the park, what was it, City Park in New York, and Nas and his posse showed up, and everybody's guns were drawn. It was just him and Pac. So basically, it was just him. Everybody, there was like 50 other people there, he said, with guns, but he was the only one with Pac. And he thought he was going to lose his life that night. But he drew his weapon. He stood his ground. Never left his side. But the night of the shooting, he said that Reggie had kept calling and calling and calling. Now, apparently, from what I understand, there was Tim Simpson, who I've never heard that name out of Michael's mouth. But apparently he's a real person, and he would work for Death Row, except for everything that has come to light thus far never included that name. But apparently they had the same room. But for some reason, only Michael was able or capable or physically able to answer the phone, and it was Reggie blowing him up. taking him off POC to take him to 662, knowing he'd be ready. So Michael did his thing. When he was ready, he let him know, and he came over and picked him up. And he took him to 662 and told him he was manning the door. Now, if they're not allowed to have guns there, and Michael's manning the door, and he has a weapon on him, how is that possible if they are trying to get a liquor license? It doesn't make any sense to me. And then he said he's standing right next to Reggie, and he hears Gotham come over his radio, because nobody else had their radios for that night for some reason. And they all had radios. And Frank tells you, if you listen to one of his videos, apparently Hackey had his. Kevin Hackey. He was supposed to be, from what I understand, a crossing guard, security guard. But they asked where he was, and he said he was booking a perp. Well, on fight night, it's usually a weekend, and a crossing security guard, a perp, that leaves me a little shocking information there. Irrelevant, but apparently he had Frank's radio. So nobody had radios but Reggie and whoever was on the other end of the radio, letting them know they got him. And it just so happened to be within minutes after the shooting. And then before he knew it, he said him and Reggie were in the car going to the hospital, and they beat them there.
They beat Suge and Tupac to the hospital?
That's what he said. So I don't know how Reggie got that information so quickly, if the ambulance couldn't get him there quicker. Because isn't that the whole point of having an ambulance come? I would think, but that's just my own personal opinion. So Michael said they got to the hospital, and then they waited and waited for hours, and Afeni showed up, and he was not in good condition at that point. He had just come out of the OR, and it was not looking good. And they waited and waited and waited, and there was a doctor who gave a press conference, I guess, the next day after surgery, and let everybody know what room he was in, where he was at. And one of his homeboys went and got a U-Haul or something and put it in front of the hospital so that they couldn't shoot through the hospital. It was crazy. Michael said it was like a zoo. And then they were all called to Suge's house. And the shit hit the fan. He said red shit was flying everywhere. And nobody would tell him. Nobody told Suge. Michael said, I didn't have a problem telling him. I let him know. We were told not to carry weapons because he was so pissed off at Frank. Everyone kept blaming Frank. And Michael's like, what do you mean? What was he supposed to do? He didn't have a weapon. The only one that supposedly got a shot off, from what I understand from Michael, was Buntry. And he was back behind the posse when they were boxed in. And all Frank remembered was an arm extending out the window with a gun. A dark black arm sleeve or whatever he said, I don't recall. But Michael said it was a shit show at Suge's house because they kept blaming Frank. Michael said, wait a minute. How are we going to blame him when we're all told not to carry a weapon?
Was Mike supposed to guard Tupac that night?
Oh, absolutely. He asked Frank about it 1,000 times. In fact, I was at Michael's house when he had talked. Frank had called one time. And he goes, Mike, I told you that night. He kept saying, where's more, about 1,000 times. I got so tired of hearing it. He goes, it drove me nuts. Where's more? Because they took more off of him. They took Michael off of him and only had Frank on him. So that was a disaster right there. Because it's no big secret. Frank was his friend. When you're with your friends, you're out having a good time. You forget when you're drinking and partying and having a good time, you're there to work. But Michael didn't forget, because Michael wasn't a lounge liver. He didn't drink. He didn't really party. We had a glass of wine maybe after dinner every once in a blue moon on a hot summer night when he had pain after he fell off the fire truck. And that's about the extent of his drinking.
So tell us about his injury. Well, how did that happen?
Well, Michael was very, very intelligent. He was an engineer. He went to college and he wanted to be a firefighter. And in order to be a firefighter, you had to be an engineer to determine the amount of water necessary for a fire. So there was like I want to say 8-alarm fire in Palm Springs, and Arizona and California were both called to see if they could send anybody. And Michael's troops went, platoon, whatever you call it, his station. And Michael was on top of the fire truck, which is where he was putting fuel in. The fuselage is on the top of the actual fire truck. And they had a special code that you stomped before you got down. But when Michael was done, the driver had his iPod buds in his ears. Now, this is going back, because I met him in, I want to say, 2007, and he had already had 2 surgeries, because I flew out there with him for the third one and brought him home. And when the guy pulled out, Michael was just finishing and stood up. As soon as he stood up, the guy pulled out with the fire truck, and Michael flew off the back of the truck, did a backflip, and landed on his lumbar spine, the low back, on a boulder. And he couldn't move. They had to airlift him to Riverside, to County Hospital. And Dr. Sam Vanis did immediate surgery on him as soon as he arrived. He was that bad. He had to be operated on immediately.
And what year was the accident? Do you remember?
I don't really recall, because I wasn't with him yet. But I know that the last one he had, like I said, I flew out there and I rented, I knew he couldn't fly back. Well, no. We flew out there. He had the surgery. And then he stayed with his mom for a little while because he knew he just couldn't take a ride home. So I had to come back because I was working still. I hadn't had my car accident yet. And so I flew back out there and I rented a car and went to his mom's and got him and took him back to the airport and brought him home. And he was miserable 24/7. His back was awful. And there was nothing that made it better. And he kept thinking that, something's got to give, I got to get better, because he hated it. All he did was practically stay in bed. If we needed groceries, I got excited if we went to the Walmart or to the dollar store or Home Depot for whatever. That was all we did, because he couldn't take the pain. So he didn't really have a life much after his first back surgery. He was pretty much bedridden.
How long after the accident did he pass away? What's like the time in between?
His last surgery he had after we met. Like I said, I flew out there and flew back and flew back and flew back. And then that was in 2008. Because it was the end of 2007, I'm sorry. And when I first met him in June 27th of 2007. Because that's the date we were going to get married. It was the 27th of the following year of 14. And I brought him home and he had recovered. And he was doing okay, but he was so miserable. He just had so much pain. And then they gave him patches and they tried so many things. He couldn't even do therapy, any kind of physical therapy, any kind of movement hurt. He was like useless in his mind, but he was brilliant in his mind, which is crazy to say, but it was so hard for him because he had such a brilliant mind to just be so sedentary. He was pretty much bedridden, but he fought through the pain, every day and did what he had to do to get things done that needed done that I couldn't do. Because by 2008, that March, I was in a car accident. And I was going through my green light, and an oncoming car made a U-turn in front of me. And I T-boned him. I T-boned him, bounced off him, and then I hit the sidewalk and blew my 2 front tires. And my head ricocheted off my window and then off the steering wheel. So I blew out my whole neck. I ended up having 4 neck surgeries. So I was as miserable as he was. For 5 straight years, I had surgeries. So we were constantly in pain. But I think he couldn't deal with it, the pain. It was too great. And it was literally putting him into a state of depression where he couldn't function without taking his medication. And I took mine as I needed to. I had a lot of pain, but I tried to fight against taking it because I know what it can do to you. I just lost my brother 2 years prior to a drug addiction. And he needed 2 total knee replacements. So he was in severe pain every day too. Pain changes you. It doesn't matter if it's physical, mental, emotional. It changes you. And it changed him.
So tell us what you want to say to him, and we'll conclude it there. Because today is the anniversary of his passing, right? You want to talk about that and then tell us what you'd like to say to him.
Yeah. Today's 10 years. I've been at the cemetery for 10 years straight, every day, or every year on this day. And every year it doesn't get any easier. I still miss him as much as I did that day I woke up to a cold, empty shell where the love of my life once resided, wrapped in his arms. And it pains me. I miss him like crazy. He'll always be a part of my heart. And half my heart is missing because it's with him. There's so many things I want to say to him. And so many things that he has said to me that I'm almost speechless because I love this man with all my heart. And I'm a very difficult person to love, and he was a very difficult person to love. And I think that's how we ended up coming together. I think it was God's plan to teach us both how difficult it is to love someone, each other, because we were so hard. We were both so headstrong. But if I got one more chance to have a conversation with him, I think I would tell him how much I love him. I miss him like crazy. I would do anything to be with him again. And he asked me and begged me over and over and over to watch The Notebook. Finally, I watched The Notebook. And at the end of the movie, the 2 of them are in bed together. And they both died. And ever since I watched the movie with him, which was like 2 or 3 years prior to him passing, he would never say goodbye to me. he'd always say, I'll be seeing you. Because to him, saying goodbye, if I went to the store or went to wherever, work, it was finality. He would never say goodbye, even on the phone. He would not say goodbye. He would say, I love you, but I'll be seeing you.
So all you out there who have a loved one, don't take them for granted, because one day they may not be there.
No, the biggest lesson I think that I've learned that I wish everybody in the world could understand is that time is truly the greatest gift you can give to another human being. Because when that time runs out, you can't get it back. You don't get second chances. You can't have any do-overs. You can't buy it. It's truly priceless. Don't waste it. And if you waste it wisely.